Hello, this is Seth Welling, and I'm starting a new series. It's called the AFI 100 Greatest American Films. These films have been selected by 1,500 film artists, critics, and film historians as being the best American films ever made. For the most part, I'm using the 1998 list, the original list, but I will be updating the list and the actual videos with the latest version, the 2017 version of the AFI 100 Greatest American Film list. Overall, these films have stood the test of time, and the reason why they have comes down to issues like timeliness. A lot of them were the right film, made at the right moment in time, and it found the right audience because of these first two factors. Many of the older films are unwatchable because of the way they were written, the way they were acted, or the way they were filmed, and it's just, you can tell, they're less engaging. But these 100 greatest films are still engaging. They may not be as engaging as current films like the new Transformer film or Baby Driver or what have you, but these are the films that inspired the films of today. Without these 100 greatest films and many others like them that didn't make the list, we would not have cinema that's as good as the cinema we have today. So I'd like to introduce people to the old films just because I find it really interesting that, what was it? It was 5 years ago Footloose came out, and everyone was talking about Footloose. But I remember the Footloose that came out in 1984, the original one with Kevin Bacon, and it's part of what made him a big star instead of just a star. And it bugs me that people don't know about these older films, which are entertaining as they were when they came out, but they're just not in vogue right now. And the problem is, as a filmmaker, and before I was a filmmaker, I was a film buff. And I used to watch films, old films from the 60s, new films from the 80s and 90s. I got something out of every film I watched. But people who are not quite so obsessed with films wouldn't necessarily know that there was an earlier Footloose, or there was an earlier Ocean's 11 or Manchurian Candidate, and they need to be opened up to these kind of things to be able to experience the original work. Sometimes the original work is not as good, but these films are really impressive. Sometimes you have to take into account that they were made in 1942, for instance, but they are still as good as the current films, but they're not as, they don't use as much of our current film prowess, explosions, or whatever we use in jump cuts. And to start this off, I am going to talk about Citizen Kane. Now, Citizen Kane is regarded as the greatest American film ever made. It stars Orson Welles of War of the Worlds fame. He did a radio program in 1936 about aliens coming to New Jersey, and people freaked out and created mass hysteria. And I'm sure he didn't mean it to cause mass hysteria, but it was so good that it caused mass hysteria. After he had his radio career, he went into film and he made Citizen Kane. Citizen Kane at a very basic level is the American success story. You know, poor kid from a poor neighborhood does good, becomes president of the United States or something, or becomes a captain of an industry, like. And we see this all around us, like Mark Zuckerberg, his dad was a dentist, and Mark went to Harvard. He dropped out of Harvard to start after Facebook took off, and now he's Mr. Facebook. Or Steve Jobs, who was a product of a poor background, who never graduated from college either, made Apple computers with Steve Wozniak and a bunch of other people. There are many of the stories playing out through American history and even right now, because this is the American success story. But there's also an idea that is this kind of success good or isn't? And you know, we always see there's always a question as to whether this success, this instant fame, this multi-millionaire existence is wholly good. Because, like, Bill Gates, he invented Microsoft with Paul Allen, some other people, and he's been able to hold on to his holdings and not experience the downside of fame. But other people like Jared Fogle, who was just a kid from Indiana University when he invented the Subway diet, lost all the weight, but he couldn't, you know, the fame just got to him, and he just let some really nasty parts of his personality go wild. Now he's in jail, you know, and this movie really begs the question as, is hyper success good? Actually, Orson Welles would never admit to this, but Citizen Kane, the character, was actually based on William Randolph Hearst, who was a media magnate. He owned a bunch of newspapers in New York in the turn of the last century, like 1800s, late 1800s, 1900s. And he is credited with getting the Spanish-American War underway, because we had a tense situation with Cuba, and we had all the makings of a war where we had ships like the USS Maine in Havana Harbor. He sent a reporter named Rembrandt, you know, that Rembrandt, the famous artist, to Cuba to capture images of, you know, the tension. And he told Rembrandt, he sent a telegram that says, you provide the pictures and I'll provide the war. It was one of the first ever instances of yellow journalism. Today we call that fake news, but back then it was yellow journalism. And this is really back in the news today with all of our political upheaval. You know what I'm talking about. I'm not going to go into it, but I'm going to say that this film was made in 1942. At that point we were in the Second World War, and it was timely, so people flocked to the theaters, and it was a very popular movie. You should see it if you want to just answer the question, is fame always good? Stay tuned for more videos like this. Have a good day.